Hey everyone, and welcome to Seriously Risky Business, the podcast that we do here at Risky Biz, all about cybersecurity policy and intelligence. Patrick Gray is still away on holiday this week, so my name is Amberleigh Jack, and in just a moment I'll be talking to our policy and intelligence editor, Tom Uren, all about the Seriously Risky Business newsletter that has been published today. You can, of course, find that and subscribe on our website, risky.biz. First, though, I'd like to thank the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation for supporting Tom's work here at Risky Biz, and also Lawfare, who syndicate Tom's newsletter and publish it on the Lawfare Media website. Finally, we do have a corporate sponsor this week, which is Xero Network. So, g'day, Tom. How are you? Always lovely to see you.
G'day, Amberleigh. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. Now, you and I, this kind of made me laugh actually. You and I were talking earlier this week about recent reporting that Spain had contracted Huawei to manage the storage for the government's lawful intercept systems. And at the time you said to me, this is really stupid. And then as you started writing it, it turns out it got a bit worse. And they've actually been in a bit of a relationship for many years now.
Yeah. So my personal journey with this story is that it's a terrible decision. How could anyone make that decision in this day and age? Because there's been a whole lot of concerns about Huawei over the last, I guess, decade in particular. And they basically wrapped up around how the Chinese government behaves very aggressively and coercively. And it also has put that into law, where it says any company, any person, any organisation, if you're required, you have to help with intelligence work and keep it a secret. And so that's raised a whole lot of concerns about what the PRC might do with companies that have critical positions in other countries. Well, I guess in this case it would be telecommunication infrastructure. So over the last decade, a whole lot of countries have banned Huawei and ZTE from critical parts of 5G networks in particular. So it seems nonsensical that you could make a decision to put it into a critical part of your lawful intercept system. So lawful intercept systems, for anyone who doesn't know, are ways that telcos can give authorities the content of messages. So the way it works is they get given a warrant or a court order and they can siphon up whatever, messages, calls, etc. And those systems are built into the way that almost all modern telcos work, because it's in every government's individual interest to have these systems. They're used to fight crime in particular, but they're also used for counterintelligence. These are a great place to be if you're both for law enforcement but also for foreign intelligence services, because these systems give you the ability to collect information. Even without the ability to collect information, you can see what's being tasked, who is of interest, and there's actually a really long history of foreign intelligence services compromising these systems. So back in 2004, in the lead up to the Athens Olympics, the local telco was compromised, and these systems were subverted to basically collect about 100 different phone numbers. And so that's over 20 years now, and that seemed like quite a sophisticated hack. So it targeted the Prime Minister and his wife, Ministers of National Defence, Foreign Affairs and Justice, Mayor of Athens, a whole lot of people. And so when you've got a system like that, it's actually quite important for national security. So why would you essentially leave the keys with a company that you've got these concerns with?
Yeah, absolutely. And you also touched on, you spoke about the Athens Olympics there. You also touched on the newsletter about Salt Typhoon hacks on US telcos as another example.
Yeah. So it turns out that Salt Typhoon, which is a Chinese-backed group, has been trying to get access, or appears to be trying to get access, to lawful intercept systems. So the reporting I've read, the most detailed reporting, says that they got access to portals that were used to task that system. So basically, law enforcement or whoever would submit tasking. So they didn't actually get access to the systems, although that seems to be, for some reason, the received wisdom. They got access to the portals that were used to task the system. And that makes sense. If you know what numbers are being put in there, if you're the Chinese government, you can say, this number corresponds to someone who we've got an interest in. Maybe they're an agent of ours, or maybe they're someone that we're trying to act for us. Perhaps we'd better lay low. It's basically a tip-off for their intelligence services if their assets are being tasked.
Yeah, for sure. So even if you don't get full access, it's still useful to...
Yeah, it lets you know what
information.
the US agencies are interested in.
Yeah.
And, maybe it actually gives you a green light. Here's an agent who isn't being tasked. They're good to go. There's no interest in them so far. But it turns out that the reporting was that Spain had signed a new contract, or that was the way the reporting was interpreted. But diving deeper, a new contract for Huawei to provide the storage for its lawful intercept system. So having a Chinese, they're basically categorized as a high-risk vendor because of the Chinese laws, so intimately involved in your lawful intercept system just seemed like a terrible idea. But it turns out that they've actually been involved in Spain's lawful intercept system for almost, over 2 decades now, so back in 2004. So that was, to me, both more understandable, but also in a way more shocking or more worrying. And back in 2004, people didn't have the same concerns. It was a very different world. And you can sort of see that you develop a contract with Huawei. They're providing a storage array or storage services for this system, and you just keep trucking along, and you renew the contract, and it's like the frog boiling metaphor, where these concerns about Huawei are getting more and more intense, and at some point between 2004 and today, there should have been a time where you went, okay, next time we revisit this contract, it's time to do something different, because we can't, the status quo just isn't sustainable anymore.
Yeah,
but that's never happened. So to this day, Huawei still provides the storage. It's not a It's not a lay down misère. I think the Chinese intelligence services still have to do some work, but it basically gives them a leg up if they wanted to compromise Spain's system. It's an advantage. Rob Joyce, who formerly of NSA, who headed both their cybersecurity division and previously their hacking division, he basically said, he described it as Spain is putting Salt Typhoon out of business because they're just giving it all away. Now, he's a person who would know exactly what that kind of access would provide. So I guess it's past time for a new, you've got to rip the Band-Aid off, make that hard decision, choose someone else.
And I mean, I may need you to explain this to me like I'm 5, Tom, but you touched on a couple of things that seemed quite significant. The fact that these systems are a high-value target for foreign intelligence. Also, the issue that China can compel its vendors to assist intelligence efforts. Is there any reason why Spain would continue this?
I think
other than we've been going steady for 20 years and breaking up is really hard?
I think it's probably more expensive. I think there's a changeover cost when you get one vendor doing something and you replace them. I think it's hard and painful. I think that maybe there's also geopolitical reasons to do with the relationship between Spain and China that could play a part. So those are all factors. And you can also say to yourself things like, well, we've designed the system in such a way that it doesn't matter. I think you can fool yourself into thinking that, but I think that ultimately a lot of these systems, it relies on trusted supply chains, Like when it becomes a critical system, you have to rely on trusted supply chains because you can't guarantee that everything's secure. And from a Chinese intelligence point of view, it doesn't have to be something as dramatic as you must install a backdoor in these servers and that will get us the magic that we need. It could be as simple as, here's the source code, here's how it works. These are the things that we do. You could help set up test beds of the CITEL is the system, the Spanish intercept system, and figure out, as a playpen to sort of experiment and figure out what would actually work. So none of those are actually backdoors, but they're still very, very useful assistance to intelligence efforts, I guess. So I think that all these decisions are about balancing risk and effort or cost, I guess. And I guess from the Spanish point of view, the risk has changed dramatically over 20 years, but they haven't. It doesn't seem that they ever revisited it and re-architected the system to make that decision to change that Huawei's involvement.
The other topic that I wanted to chat to you about that you had that you wrote in the newsletter this morning is kind of an update on last week. Last week you wrote about Scattered Spider, the cybercrime community, if we want to call them that, and you mentioned that there was sort of 4 key players that seemed to be driving the group's activities. As luck would have it, that very same day, 4 people got arrested in the UK over those recent UK retail hacks. And you're sort of writing that we can't say for sure that they are the key personnel, at least not all of them. But there's good news in that the Scattered Spider chaos may slow, and not so good news in that this won't be the end of Scattered Spider.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. The UK National Crime Agency, they announced that 4 people had been arrested. So one of the interesting things is that they were 19, 17 and 20. So from my perspective, all very young people.
So young, yeah.
Now, they didn't release names, but Brian Krebs, writing on Krebs on Security, said, people have told me that 2 of these individuals. And I think there's a couple of interesting things. Both of those people were over 18. So they're now old enough to get tried as adults. And so I think that's makes a difference. Now, one of them, a guy called Tala Jubair, I thought his resume, as Krebs relayed it, was very interesting. So he was a founding member of a SimSwap Telegram channel called Star Fraud Chat. Now, Star Fraud Chat has been linked to a number of different hacks, like pretty significant hacks over time. He was also the founder of a criminal service that sold emergency data requests. So an emergency data request is when the police or some other official agency lobs up to a service provider and says, hey, we need subscriber details double quick because we've got a life or death situation. And there's some reason, like you can think of many. And so in the criminal service, what they would do is they would get access to an official law enforcement email address, and they would construct a pretext for an emergency data request and send it off, and usually they would get back replies within a couple of hours. So it turns out that mostly there's this kind of tiered process where if there's time, you have to get a warrant, and the service provider, Facebook or a telco, will scrutinize that warrant, make sure it's legit. There's an official procedure, they can verify it. But when it's an emergency data request, it's basically, if it just comes from the right email address, there's just no time to go through a process to check it. And there is no good process. And often these are legit email accounts. And so this individual, Jubair, he's been involved in 2 services which take advantage of, I guess you'd call them weaknesses in identity verification. He was involved in Lapsus previously as a core member, and he was also the administrator of a doxing community called Doxbin. So that's the kind of person that feels like a key individual. I don't know if that is one of the top 4 that I wrote about last week.
For the role, right?
Yeah. I think, administrator, founder of 2 different services, involved in Lapsus, which was a similar kind of criminal group. What distinguished Lapsus was that they were actually public about their hacks. So they had a public presence. They called themselves Lapsus. Scattered Spider is many of the same people. They just don't have a public presence. And so Scattered Spider is the name that outsiders have given them. It's complicated. So he feels like a key individual. So it was interesting to me that last week I wrote, there are 4 key individuals, people say. And here is someone who's arrested who looks like a key individual. The other person Krebs identified, Owen Flowers, is also alleged to have been involved in Lapsus and also in the hacks of MGM casinos, which were very disruptive. It's less clear that he is a key individual because basically Krebs has reported on less stuff on him. So there's less of a history. But in both cases, these individuals had been involved in these communities since they were at least 15, if not younger. And so that's 4 years of, I guess, honing their tradecraft, learning new skills. And these communities, the way everyone describes them is that they're a pipeline where people are recruited when they're very young. Older people get them to do something as a part of mitigating risk for the older person. So if the young person's caught, it's hard for authorities to do anything with them. And so they get, I guess you'd call it radicalized or trained, and they, over time, do more and more aggressive and outrageous things.
Yeah, for sure.
Until basically they hit 19 or 20, get arrested, and then get sent to jail. So that seems to be the way this works. These arrests have impact because they sort of chill the community. People do see that and they get afraid. But when you're, I guess, 15 and the last person was arrested last year, that feels like a lifetime ago. And so basically the criminal elements just bounce back over time. There's a pipeline of new people, new spiderlings getting developed, and they pick up over time. So to me, it was interesting that last week it was, here are 4 key individuals. This week it is, here's an arrest. It looks like maybe one of the key individuals, perhaps. But it also sheds light on, there is this pipeline that will, I guess, like a many-headed hydra, or whatever analogy you want to choose, will replace them over time. Even if they were key individuals, there's someone who'll step up and take their ranks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like any good business. Upskilling your staff is important, and even cybercrime, I guess, you want to know that someone's ready to take over when the boss retires. But it does, of course, mean that, well, as you say in the newsletter, we may get a respite because these arrests have happened. There could be a lull, but they're going to bounce back because they are training these up-and-comers.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that you use the word training. I'm not sure that I would describe it as training, in that it doesn't seem to be structured in the way that it would be in a business. I think it's just a sort of an emergent property of the communities, that there's opportunities to do more and more audacious, outrageous, boundary-pushing things. And for some individuals, I guess that's just what suits their personalities. And so it's a combination of people involved. There's enough of them that there will be these people who want to do this stuff and get a thrill out of it. And the opportunity to do these out-of-bounds, I guess they're exciting because they're essentially illegal. And that combination is a form of training, even though it's not structured in the same way that you would do it as a business. And I guess it's more like a filter where you find the uber criminals, I guess, who just are really good at this stuff because that's what works for them. It's a great sieve, and they're basically unrestrained. Like they're always pushing new boundaries. The way you get into those communities is a lot of it is around validation and status, and the way you get that is by doing amazing things. And so I think from a company security point of view, if I was a CISO, I would be very, very afraid that I'd be targeted by these groups, because they will have success. Like, I don't think there's very few companies that are totally immune to these kinds of tactics and techniques.
So good to spend the next couple of months where there might be some quiet time just boosting that security a bit.
I guess make the crown jewels a bit more protected, I suppose.
Well, interesting stuff there, Tom, and a little bit depressing as well, but let's call it there. Thanks so much for your time. You can, of course, read Tom's newsletter over at our website, risky.biz. And Tom, you're going away on holiday, so I guess we will see you in a little bit when you get back.
Thanks, Amberleigh.